What you are about to see is a real-life story. The accounts have gone into great detail to give each side's version of this, an exclusive one, we understand. One of the most talked about.
Hello. I'm excited to welcome everyone to PiFi number 96. Can you believe it? We're almost to 100. And one of my goals was to bring on Miss Moneypenny, the lovely, lavish Moneypenny from the UK, before we reached 100. So I met my goal. Yes. So how is everyone? How are you, Moneypenny?
I'm good. I'm really excited to have a little quadrum, four of you. Well, 3 of you, 4 of us. Yeah.
It's probably 3 against 1, you 3 against me, because they usually take the side of the guests. So I'm just kidding. How about you, Alexei? How are you doing?
Doing great. Another day in paradise, you know.
Tampa. And Patrick, who's not too far from me in Tennessee, or was that private? I hope it's not private information. I just doxed you. Dang it.
Oh no, they're gonna find me in the 700,000 mile landscape of Tennessee.
Yeah, deep in the woods. I would challenge somebody to try to find me, but they probably would. So I don't want to do that. But
I think you gave your location away like 4 episodes ago.
I know. It's like I'm so silly. But I'm glad to see you guys. I'm actually happy tonight to have, I don't know what it is. I have a weakness for lovely women from the UK that have that British accent. I'm a sucker for that. I don't know what it is. And I know that you're more than that. And that's why I wanted you to come on the show, because you're very mysterious to me and intriguing. And I don't know, I go into spaces on Twitter and you're always at the top. You know, you got your speaker. You know what I mean? People want to hear from you. So I was like, the ether once again said, you have to invite Moneypenny.
Wow. I hope I don't let you down this time then. No.
I was wondering, again, I don't know much about you. So I was hoping you would just kind of, if you don't mind, I would probably butcher it if I tried to introduce you. Do you mind telling us, the people who don't know about anything about you, a little about you?
Sure, yeah. So I am called Moneypenny because mainly I worked in London, in the city, for about 25 years in financial services. I started as an economist for Chase Manhattan. Real rat race stuff, 15-hour days. Everybody was chain smoking. It wasn't quite like Wolf of Wall Street. There were no dwarfs being tossed. I can tell you that, but it was pretty hard work. But I live in the UK. I'm in England. I live alone with 2 little dogs. I had a very rough time over the pandemic. I got COVID before people realized it existed and acknowledged it, which was in December of 2019, Christmas Day. I'd just come out of a 9-year relationship and a divorce, and I'd bought myself a week in St. Lucia, which is my favorite place. I've been there probably 30 times. And I was in St. Lucia, December 2019, caught COVID. And I am now, officially the longest long COVID sufferer in the UK that I know of. I think there might be a couple of others that probably don't get brave enough to come on TV and radio. But I used to be a journalist. I did lots of journalism throughout university. I ran all the university radio stations and newspapers. And then I went to the BBC, where I did a lot of BBC radio and some TV stuff. And I've always sort of been quite independent, lived on my own and done most things. I'm quite adventurous. I've done British ballroom dancing champion when I was 15, 16, do ballroom and Latin American. And then I went into motor racing. I've always had a thing for speed. My father is ex-RAF, Royal Air Force, and very much into his cars. When we were growing up, we were forced to watch motor racing, and I really got to like it. And then I worked for a big insurance company that sponsored it. And I thought, I can't watch this. I want to do it. So I took my motor racing license and I learned to ride a motorbike, much to my father's displeasure, because I've got one brother whom my father said to my brother all the time, you must never ride a motorbike, far too dangerous. So I put my helmet on with my nice black visor. And first day I had a motorbike, zoomed up onto my father's drive. And of course, he came running out. Who are these bikers on the driveway? And of course, I just took my helmet off and went, hi, Dad. You didn't tell me I couldn't ride a motorbike. Yeah. So now I've run various businesses. I started my first business in my 20s. I've run 3 different businesses. I've sold into other businesses. I was very successful, very good in my career. And unfortunately, when COVID hit, I got taken down, really. So I've had 4 years pretty much housebound, pretty much disabled, multiple organ damage. I won't go into all the horrors of it. I'm sure you can ask if you want to, but I don't have much mobility like I used to. I get out of breath very easily. Lost all my friends, my family. Well, I don't have any family left, really, just one person who I hardly see. And it's quite a lonely life. So I took to social audio. I took to going online to social media because I was lonely. That was the main reason. And then I got into communities where I realized I could help educate people, particularly people that were suffering with COVID. I've done virology, epidemiology, a lot of science work. I'm a bit of a nerd. That's why I love my the science I've discovered through the UFO Twitter community, the alien community. It's been brilliant and fascinating, particularly following Ashton Forbes' MH370 investigations. The anniversary today. And yeah, that's how you found me, I think, Tony.
Yes. Yeah, I had been following Ashton myself, and he's been on the show. I didn't know if you knew that. I think I got him to say that he was. I don't know. I'm not going to brag and say I was the first, but I actually got him to say he was open to other ideas or to other options. And actually, anyway, I don't want to make it about him, but he's actually pretty open-minded about it. And I think people give him too much of a hard time. But
I do. I agree. Yeah, I think he seems to be very honest. He's very committed. But I think, like me, he is now more into the sort of scientific discoveries, particularly the free energy type discoveries, the lithium ion batteries, aviation propulsion, all those sorts of things. I mean, he really has opened my eyes and ears to investigating it, which I think is brilliant. And he's done it for lots of people. He's got a great community. So, yeah.
I had no idea there were 20 employees from the superconductivity company. What was the name of the company that was on board the plane?
Yeah, and it's also attached to, I think it's the Rothschilds, because the Rothschilds stood to take the patent or some piece of business or whatever if the 20 of them disappeared. So, there's loads of stuff like that is very strangely conspiratorial, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to see how, I mean, it's very sketchy. The whole thing is, it's just, it's sad, but it's, I mean, you could make, you could create any sort of conspiracy that you wanted to. I mean, there's probably 10 different conspiracies you could create out of that one story. But anyway, I don't want to make it too much about that. But unless everybody wants to.
It is quite interesting. It is the world's largest financial scandal was going on in Malaysia at the time it happened. So,
Have you heard much about that story, Patrick?
No, not really.
It's quite intriguing. Before I really didn't understand the whole story about it until I started. For some reason, I just literally ran across Ashton, and I didn't even know who he was. I didn't know any of the story, but he seemed like an interesting guy, so I invited him on the show. This is what happens with everybody. I don't know anything about any people I invite on the show. I just do it because something like it's almost like the ether, like I say. But anyway, but you should look. I'm not saying it's a rabbit hole you want to go down, but if you look into it, it's a little more mysterious than meets the eye. It's very bizarre. It's one of the most bizarre incidents of a plane disappearance that you will run into. I promise you.
Oh, is it MH7?
MH370, right?
Yeah, we were talking with somebody looking into that a few weeks ago. Yeah,
that was Ashton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
He's he's basically become world famous over his investigation of the story. I mean, I would almost, I would go so far as to say that they restarted the investigation because of him. Wouldn't you agree, Moneypenny?
I wondered that. I wondered it.
Yeah.
It was on British television today, and we haven't heard anything about it. Out of the blue, on my regional television, where they do a little bit of national, the national news came up, and it was MH370. And obviously, because of the anniversary, I think it's how many years is it since 2014?
10
It was years, yeah. So they came up on our television, and honestly, I was looking at it and thinking, I don't know whether this would have had this much publicity had it not been for Ashton creating such a big uplift in its interest just really recently.
I mean, he was actually invited to Joe Rogan's show, and then I think Joe Rogan got cold feet and backed out. But
yeah,
the reason I mention that is because people might say, well, that's not that big of a story, but it is in the blogosphere, in the podcasting world. It was a huge story. So,
well, it's got so many aspects to it. I mean, scientifically, the possibility that this is advanced US military technology that has been used, that has probably been kept in a covert capacity, and that this might actually disclose in a completely well disclosure way of hidden military technology that may be linked to reverse engineering of alien technology, which has also been all over the news today, which is a bit, coincidental.
I do tend to lean towards the espionage side of things where, I mean, China did hack the Malaysian government the next day, right? That's what I understand. And because they lost scientists, they lost people on the plane, right? And then there was those 20 employees of the superconductor company. I mean, again, if you haven't looked into it.
2 Iranians that came on in false identities, 2 Iranians that took passports off 2 Europeans and got on the plane using false passports and false identities. And then, of course, a huge amount of lithium batteries that were there in the cargo.
Right. Yeah, the batteries thing is really mysterious.
There's a if anybody's interested in the chat, there's a link on Ashton's X page, Twitter page, X page, whatever we're calling it now, that has the full, it's a link to a Google document that has his 4 or 5 pages of his research on it. It's pretty amazing.
He did a show last night. He did a whole resume of absolutely everything. Yeah.
And then he did a Twitter X space. I'm sorry, I was on Twitter for 15 years. I have a hard time saying X, but
I think it's stupid. I hate it.
It's much easier to say Twitter.
They tweet me. You can't say X me.
X. That sounds kind of strange. But anyway, I don't know if that's something you all want to talk about. I'd be happy to if y'all are interested.
It's your show.
Well, no, I like to leave it up to the guests, though.
I like the science aspect of, potentially there's some missing ingredients in known physics, and maybe there were discoveries made, and people have been developing technologies utilizing those discoveries. I think it's very possible.
Yeah,
and I'm not even going to say that it's alien tech, because we had people invent like electrogravitics in the 1912s, 1920s. You have John Searle in the 40s. We've had airships since almost ancient days. To have an electrogravitic airship is not too far-fetched. And then we have drone technology, obviously. And then we have artificial intelligence, and we have swarm technology. So artificially intelligent swarm technology using advanced physics could potentially be doing some cool things.
That's what China are doing in the South China Sea, is using unmanned drones powered by AI in a swarm fashion, but also, I mean, honestly, it's almost mirroring the way that sharks or fish would I don't know, would applicate. Where did that come from? Would swim, and what they do in nature. That's what's being replicated by the AI powering these drones in the South China Sea. Yeah, it's amazing.
And that's one thing too, that like scientists really do understand that nature is like, or evolution, you could say, is one of the most efficient ways of designing technologies in different systems. And so it only makes sense that they would try to replicate like a flock of birds or a school of fish, because you think about aerodynamics and the best way to preserve energy when flying around. So you would definitely want to mimic something like that, just in general.
Well, especially in
That's
military
spot on. I just
applications.
couldn't remember the group noun for sharks. I was thinking a film of sharks.
For sharks, maybe a school. I don't know though. They're not fish, right? They're different.
That's what I was thinking. That's fish.
A covey,
Shark is a mammal.
covey of sharks.
Is it? Who came up with that?
Well,
A jaws of sharks.
a school of fish. Are they
I've heard
not
of
schools? A
Somebody
university of
who's watching, please find out the group noun for sharks.
Yeah, I was going to ask ChatGPT right now.
a university of sharks, because they're more intelligent than regular fish, which are schools.
Pack of sharks. Let's see. What do we got? GPT.
But
A shiver or a school. Okay, so it's a school or a shiver.
Shiver.
Of sharks.
shiver.
I like that. Shiver of
Makes
sharks.
sense.
Wow,
I'm gonna use
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Shimmy or shiver?
A shiver.
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 Shiver of sharks.
Yeah, like a shiver.
I thought Moneypenny was shimmying there. They're not shivering.
Or school. It says the terms are used to describe the collective gathering of sharks when they swim together. It depends on the context, species of sharks involved, though. It's interesting. Thanks, GPT. Wonderful oracle of knowledge.
I love it. It's awesome.
Never ending.
I actually took I guess it's 4 or 5 pages and ran it through and summarized it through with ChatGPT, and it came up with a pretty decent summary. It was a little bit biased on the obviously it wasn't going to support any kind of what it would thought would be conspiracy theory, but it was pretty fair, I think. But
Yeah, it's very nuanced. It's got much more nuance.
Yeah. I was just trying to come at it from an angle of I was trying to make it more practical in my mind, because I do think that the plane could easily have been taken, so to speak. Or, and if it was, what kind of technology. I'm not a big fan, obviously, of I say obviously. I should just say I'm not a big fan of the the teleportation theory, but I guess we'll see.
Advanced, yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I
I
don't really have an official opinion in either way. Like
Oh, you have to. That's part of the rules.
But that's based on
No.
the speed of light. That's what this is that so you've got matter, you've got obviously solids, vapors and water, but everything breaks down at a subatomic level to your electrons, your neutrons, your protons, whatever. So when matter changes matter, like boiling a kettle, turning water into vapor, you're taking all the little electrons and protons and the subatomic particles, you're disassembling and then reassembling into a different matter state. And the idea of the MH370 or anything disappearing, whether it be a Star Trek transporter or whatever it might be, is that you reduce it down to subatomic and then you reassemble it. So what happens is when you hit light speed, and I'm not 100%, this is obviously me looking at other people who are much better at quantum physics than I am. But the idea is that when you hit light speed, you can't actually travel faster than light speed. At the point you hit light speed, you become a sine wave. So the whole theory of the transportation thing is that when it hits light speed, and there's also a thermal part to this, because obviously you've got the heat from these lithium batteries giving it a thermal coupling, I think it's called. So as you hit light speed, or you're recreating light speed, and don't forget you've got these 3 drones going around it in a sort of centrifugal force type thing, creating a vacuum type effect. Then you hit the light speed, which goes bang, you turn into the sine wave, which means everything goes down to the subatomic particles, at which point, technically, from Einstein's theory of relativity and time travel, is that it could transport, it would reduce in matter and then move in time and then reassemble itself. It could be anywhere. It could be somewhere. Could be in the 1950s. I don't know, but it's fascinating.
So
I think-
would it be like the centrifugal force? So that the pattern of the drones or the objects around the plane we could consider that that's not necessarily centrifugal because their positions were changing so much. They were going in a circle around it, but they were also like if they were locked into a centrifugal pull, the centripetal force from the plane or the object they're rotating around would keep them in a solid circle going around, like kind of perpendicular to the angle of the plane, whereas they're going like this in their circle. That would be my only like observation on that.
I think the idea is that if you've got 3 points, so in sacred geometry, you have obviously your triangle, your square, whatever. So you're creating a 3 point with the 3 drones, okay? So the fourth thing is actually through the triangle is the aeroplane. So the plane is actually surrounded by the 3 points. So it causes a vacuum, like a sucking or a pushing on the plane, which you can actually see from the trail of the plane on the satellite image. The trail from the plane is when the 3 drones are around it, it's sucking the plane, pulling the plane backwards, creating a vacuum into which the plane then goes. And it's the vacuum that is needed to increase the speed. That's what Ashton was talking about. Yeah.
Okay, and maybe it's because like each drone or each object could have a role in moving forward ahead of the other two, so that they're not in like a perfect ring formation. Because usually when we think of centrifugal force, it's sustaining all of the objects in a continuous circle, whereas these are kind of like moving.
They are aligned.
this
I
way.
think. I don't know.
Well, it's like they're the same distance apart, but they're not necessarily like in a solid ring as they're moving with the plane. The ring is more like this, like they're doing this motion.
Oh,
they're going-
right.
Yeah, if you
That's
could look at how
amazing.
they're moving. Yeah,
I didn't know.
it's so
Yeah.
weird. I mean that we understand more about it soon. It's really interesting.
Yeah, when it comes to the just to kind of help maybe a different like a same perspective but just different wording, like you have the 3 objects creating a vortex ultimately, and as energy spirals inwards to that perfect 0 point, it eventually turns into a longitudinal wave, electromagnetic wave, and that longitudinal wave will travel faster than light. That's the longitudinal aspect of electromagnetism versus like the transverse aspect.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
It's basically like you have a whirlpool coming to a point, and at the point is where the transverse wave turns into a longitudinal wave and squirts out almost.
And that's the
It's
pulling
when
that I
winter-
was talking about, is it? That's the longitudinal.
Well, and that
within the
would come
triangle.
across as like a vacuum effect, you know.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
We've just never observed anything like that.
No, we have. That's where Dan Winter's work really comes into play. Like the guys that he's been working with and stuff, they do vortex energy that focuses electromagnetism to a point. It's called phase conjugation.
We've
And, like,
observed teleportation.
They've observed, like, I believe, I'm not going to say they've observed teleportation. I don't actually know that. I know they've observed faster than light.
Yeah.
Like 1.6 and like 1.9 times.
Did they
that's
talk about it
more-
going into the sine wave when it hit light speed?
I'm just not
Well,
sure
what-
how you reassemble.
It goes from, light's always kind of in a sine wave, but more of a longitudinal wave. Might be,
Yeah.
yeah. I know exactly what you're saying though. Yeah.
The thing with light is it's not just a wave, it's also the photons, isn't it? Because this whole double slit experiment and everything with light,
Well, it
It's
becomes
all
a photon when,
because you've
when
got
it's
the observer
observed.
effect as well, haven't you? That when you're observing or even measuring or looking at light in the 2-slit experiment, it actually behaves differently when they were trying
Well,
to
that's
decide whether light was a wave or photons.
Right.
Yeah, to me, it seems almost. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Patrick.
I was going to say that's quantum entanglement or the observer problem.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna say like the only reason. I mean, that seems obvious because the only way that you can have a relationship is a relative vibration on a relative vibration, and if you're not relatively vibrating with whatever you're trying to look at, it's not going to exist within the perception of it. So yeah, because light, yeah, for like something to be observed, it has to be in the same frame of motion, and so light to someone is going to look different than light to someone else because of the wave nature of the fluid of experience.
I mean, I could.
I could go on.
The only thing I'm thinking is that if you're going to do something like that, you'd probably want to experiment on a plane that was empty, and they didn't have people on board. So it's almost a bit over the top that they're trying. It's almost like they're trying to convince us of something. I'm a little suspicious.
I don't think it was the first time. I'm sure that wasn't an experiment. I think it was a military training maneuver that had obviously been done with empty vehicles before, I would have thought. Surely.
Yeah, that's what
I mean, those balloons that are flying over the US at the moment, the Chinese balloons. I haven't talked about UAP Cablegate, but this is something I discovered, this Cablegate project. These are cables going all the way back to Kissinger, and there's lots of references in those cables to these balloons, okay, which we've now seen very recently over the US and also actually over China and other places. But these balloons, it's all to do with different types of radiation, and radiation is the release of the electron, isn't it, from the atom? And what these balloons are doing, all the way back to Kissinger, there's reference to these balloons being sent out whenever there is a paranormal experience or a unusual avionic discovery. I mean, all the cables are written in a bit of coded language. They send out those balloons, and I can't work it out. It's low-level gamma radiation, whether or not the balloons are actually dropping radiation or whether the balloons are measuring the radiation. I don't know which it is, but that's what they're doing.
Yeah,
Would that be?
That's what Dr. Jim Segal's device picks up on, is the gamma radiation. That's one of the, he has a very specific device, and like one of the categories of energy he picks up on is gamma radiation. So it's interesting.
I'd like to read up on that. I'd like to find out more about it, because I got all these references from the cables, and because the cables have given me so much insight into so much hidden DARPA stuff, particularly DARPA contracts, which, as we know, DARPA is contracting all these external companies, particularly because you can't FOIA a contracting company. So it's not likely that we'll get another WikiLeaks in 20 years and find out what's been happening today, because it's all being done behind closed doors, funded by DARPA or the DTRA or whatever it might be, but done by private companies and spread across several private companies, not just one. But I did find a way of being able to infiltrate that, which is through the patent regulations, by looking at who's got the patents on stuff.
It's really interesting you mentioned that gamma radiation thing too, because what Dr. Jim Segal studied for his studies was basically radiation and effects on the brain and how it creates effects, almost like paranormal effects. Or he didn't study that exactly. He studied basically how radiation affects the brain, high energy, waved energy, basically, or something like that. And then he was a scientist on Skinwalker Ranch for season 1.
Was he?
Yeah, and he invented the MooPass device, which detects the gamma radiation burst. But it's just really interesting now that you say that the balloons are either producing or just happen to be where the gamma radiation is.
Yeah.
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 I just think, okay, that's just something to note. That's like noted.
No, that's good. This is all these connections. Like the thing is, it's such a jigsaw, a lot of this, and it's also rabbit holes where you go down, get so deep, and then you sort of come out and you haven't found a rabbit at all. You found something deep and dark and dirty, and you wish you hadn't gone down there in the first place. But that's fascinating, that link. I like that.
Yeah,
that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to stay out of the rabbit hole of how the plane disappeared and look at why it disappeared. I mean, I think there was probably. There was several motives, right? Now, the latest is people are, I don't know who is behind trying to convince us that the pilot, there was a report out, was it just today? There was an article about how the pilot ordered extra oxygen for the cabin and fuel that was not.
Before the flight?
Before the flight, he ordered more oxygen for the cabin, his cabin, not the pilot's cabin, that compartment, and more fuel that wasn't necessarily required.
Oh, that is interesting, because
I just read that today.
Lithium air batteries require, you can have lithium ion batteries, ION, obviously. But I was looking at, Ashton hadn't even heard of this. I was working through stuff scientifically on propulsion mechanisms, and I was looking at lithium air batteries, which obviously are using huge amounts of oxygen, which can be quite dangerous if you're using it in an aeroplane where you've got lower oxygen the higher the altitude as you're going up, because you lose it at about 10 or 12,000 feet, don't you? But if he's, God, that's made me think now, all that extra oxygen, there might be a connection.
Well,
But the
or
connection goes both ways, right? Like the connection could mean that it was more oxygen for some futuristic technology, or it basically says that the pilot was doing something nefarious or
I
had
think,
Yeah.
I think the insinuation was that he was going to, you know, decompress the plane and he would have oxygen, but the passengers wouldn't or whatever. So,
which is a real big conspiracy. But I mean, that's what that sounds like to me too. Yeah.
I was trying to find that article,
Mm.
but I just happened to run across it. I wasn't really looking for it. I just happened to see it
So that was
today.
today. That's interesting. I'm going to dig that out.
I was trying to find it while you all were speaking. Let me just do a search right quick. You all keep talking.
Yeah.
Pilot, pilot orders, fuel.
Trying to think of other reasons for having more oxygen. Obviously, being at a higher altitude for a longer amount of time. So if you are going to be, let's say, transported, if you are going to be reducing your matter, reassembling, traveling in time, potentially, yes or no, but you're going a further distance, because if you went faster than the light speed and you were going to effectively jump through this matter gate type thing, yeah, you would definitely need more oxygen. But he wouldn't have known that, would he? Because he didn't know that the US military were behind it. Because at the time, the Malaysian government said, oh, no, it can't possibly be that.
Well, that's what I was saying. That it implies that the pilot obviously knew that something was, going to happen. Like either it was going to be taken over, or he knew that he.
Is this the same pilot they accused of faking a suicide or trying to suicide himself? Though?
I think they might have tried to. Well, I also wanted to say that it also basically means that maybe he could have also just been like a paranoid person, always wanted to be like ready for anything just in case. All right, we need to make sure there's oxygen, like a prepper. Imagine a prepper pilot. He just wants to have his oxygen. Maybe it's nothing.
Well, you could find that out by looking at previous records from what that pilot's done. Although I don't know how you get that information without permission from the.
They probably have a record of that kind of thing. Like we filled up on oxygen. Noted. Like check. Who was the pilot? It's different, probably different like category, like different offices, but they could probably do something there.
And the thing is, I wouldn't trust getting information out of Malaysia at all. I mean, I went to Malaysia. I worked in Malaysia for a short time in Kuala Lumpur on the Shah Alam F1 motor racing circuit. There's the connection. But when I was out there, it was corrupt as hell. But honestly, you have to watch the Netflix documentary that the Malaysian government tried to pull, because that's the documentary that tells you all about the financial scandals. But it also shows down to the mobile phones that the passengers of MH370 had, and the fact they could have been tracked. Or they probably were tracked. They could have been triangulated at least. But they didn't do that, or they said they didn't do it. But of course, anybody could have done that. The FOIA requests are not coming out of the Malaysian Navy, RAF, Malaysian intelligence research. They have departments just like the US have, but they're not FOIAing. They're not bringing forward any information from it. I wouldn't trust it. I really wouldn't. They're not going to be forthcoming. You saw the interview with the Malaysian president or king, whatever it was, that president, I think, initially, straight after the incident. It was as spooky as, or shifty, I think is your word. Was it shifty as?
I mean, the other thing I'll add too is that I know Ashton would disagree with this totally, but I don't really think it's that easy to find a plane in a huge ocean. You know what I mean? I actually
definitely agree with that. I mean, like they've had planes go down during military exercises they can't find.
Yeah.
This is like the Bermuda Triangle. I mean,
exactly.
There have been many reports of planes like where their radar is or their signal or whatever shows up in one place, and then the pilot reports being in another place in the world, and then their signal reports that accurately as well. There's lots of mysteries in that area. So if this were a covert operation kind, that would be the place to do it, I guess, because then they can just blame it on the mysteries of the universe or whatever.
Yeah. That would have been a better place to do it.
They have like the Dragon's Triangle. Is that in Japan or something like that?
Sounds like it.
For San Francisco.
what I'm getting at is there's a lot of these vortex energy places where there's a lot of mysterious, like triangles of things happening. And people
Yes,
going
yes,
missing.
yes.
So maybe
Mariana
there was one over
Trench.
there. I don't know.
Mariana
Near the
Trench is
Mariana
like
Trench.
what 35,000 feet deep or something. What is it like? It's taller. It's deeper than the Mount Everest is tall, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Oh,
Yeah.
some fascinating stuff I've been reading about the Mariana
Yeah.
Trench. This is where more of my cellular biology interest comes in. Oh, I've got to tell you about xenobirds. Don't stop me. But Mariana Trench.
Extremophiles.
I think the reason I mentioned this the espionage angle is because I think the whole teleportation thing could be like a distraction, you know.
I think it's more likely they brought it down on what I was going to say Nicaragua. There, you know what I mean? Nicosia, the little American air base.
The little islands.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm just not a fan. And Ashton knows this too. You know, it's funny because the thing I like about Ashton is it doesn't bother him. You know, some people get offended if you say something that kind of goes against their theory, but he's just like, you know, whatever.
Yeah, he's
Which
very
I think
mature about it, isn't he?
He's very mature.
Peaceful. He's very mature. Yeah.
I think the debate is where that's where we're going to ultimately find the plane is through debate. And there's one company that's offering to do it's an offer, a contract that they only get paid if they find the plane, and they're offering to go. They think they know where it's located.
I think, Kim.com has offered to put money towards rewards for information and stuff like that. But, the bottom line is the sadness thing. We haven't even mentioned all the poor families and how distraught they are. But on the television thing in the UK today, as I said, this thing appeared on my own TV. And they actually talked to some of the people who, lost family 10 years ago that still are distraught. What came over to me, which is unusual or interesting, is none of them really gut felt that their relatives were dead. They didn't think. Now, you know how you sometimes, my father knew his brother was dying on the other side of the world exactly when it happened. There's a gut feel, is that connection. We're all part of one big thing. If so many people believe that their relative is still alive, to me, there's also a spiritual thing about that.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too. And it's a travesty these families are missing their relatives like this. There's a ton of stories relative to what you're talking about. There's a lot of stories. It's like you can be adopt a family too and have these kind of experiences.
Yeah.
The reason I consider the whole science thing a distraction is because every conversation I've been into devolves into an argument about whether we can achieve light speed or faster than light, travel or whatever. And so you get way off. It's almost like the intelligence community was like, hey, how can we get people to argue about this one thing and forget there were 20 employees from a superconductor company on board.
It does sound like a good movie script. It does. It does sound like some, Spielberg has come up with this amazing storyline, and everything is in it, isn't it?
The thing about most companies will not do that. I mean, even I worked in architecture for 5 years. I worked at a pretty decent sized architecture firm for 5 years. This was like 25 years ago. I was a project manager. We had to go out to San Francisco, and there was just 3 of us that had to go. And my boss, the owner of the firm, made us all fly on different flights because he didn't want us all on the same plane. And I mean, so these things people think about these things, right? But here you had this company. I don't know why there was 20, were they booked that way purposely? I don't know. I just think there's a lot more to the story than, the science, the sci-fi part of it, but
were they connected to the batteries in any way?
Well, their company, I don't think they actually made them. They weren't carrying them, or they weren't attached in a passenger capacity, I don't believe. But their company did specialize in superconductor work and, lithium-related supplies and resources. So it was a bit of a coincidence.
Bit of a coincidence, right? Like, were they flying with the new batteries somewhere or something? I'm just asking, like, is there a relationship? Because the batteries seem to be a big part of an argument, in quotes, a theory or argument,
I
or
think they might.
you know.
I'm not sure about the battery thing. I think they might be. The thing is, there are restrictions on taking a certain amount of batteries, but we're only talking about 80 kilos, which is less. Well, it's about the same that I weigh, probably. To me, that's not a huge amount of batteries. I don't know. I don't know about the batteries thing. I'm not sure, because also when you look at the thermal imaging and you see sort of the fuselage area being obviously deep red. I mean, I come from a military background. Obviously, I don't know a lot about airplanes, but I did. I have dated a lot of people that work in the RAF, and I was showing them a lot of the footage that Ashton had shown me, and they explained all about. They use cool air that's coming into the plane when it's at 36,000 feet. You've got extremely cool air. They use the cool air to the hot air to make the cool air hotter, and the cool air to make the hot air cooler. So that amount of glowing red on a thermal image, they believed, from something, in most military planes would not be unusual. So was it definitely the lithium batteries that was giving off that heat signature? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
But you could do comparisons from other planes at that altitude to get that answer.
Yeah, and I don't think he has.
That would be an easy answer to find.
I was trying to find the answer. Couldn't find the answer to see. I was trying to quiz the internet whether the batteries were connected to the superconductor. I mean, I don't know. They wouldn't have to be, right? Superconductors are like tiny little flakes of.
Well, I'm just saying
we don't have batteries with superconductors in.
If you're making an argument about a case, you need to have it be like one story. And so when you bring up the 20 people and then you bring up a thing of batteries in the bottom of the plane, I feel like they should be connected if you're trying to make like a coherent story.
Well, I mean, if you don't make up a story just to make them coherent, though, right?
Well, that's why I'm asking.
They don't have to be connected.
I'm asking.
Yeah.
Was there?
And I mean, that is one of about 5 or 6 stories with as much weight and potential connection. There are others. I mean, something like the chief operating officer, I think it was, of Petronas. I mean, Petronas is Malaysia's huge, great, big, wealthy, income generating, company. It's like worshipping Petronas when you go to Malaysia. Petronas is, a massive sponsor in motorsport. So the fact that this head director, COO, whatever it was, of Petronas was meant to be on that plane is listed on the passenger list, but did not get on it. And that's not the only senior person that was meant to be on the plane that didn't actually go on the plane. It's almost as though some people were warned just before the plane, which is what happened with Lockerbie. I mean, I don't know if you know all about Lockerbie. Obviously, I do, because I'm in the UK and Scotland and all the rest of it. But it's almost as though somebody was tipping off not to get on the plane. If you look at the passenger list versus the people that didn't get on it, that were meant to get on it, that's also weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just not convinced about the. I almost feel like someone's trying to convince me of the whole drone, wormhole thing to distract me from why the plane disappeared. Like, if you're going to tell me that you're going to
US had so many motives to bring it down. The Department of Justice and Goldman Sachs had a massive financial motive at the time with the Malaysian government and IMDb. The world's largest financial scandal was going on exactly at that time. Also, obviously, you had this ridiculously corrupt Malaysian prime minister whose head was on the block pretty much, who eventually got kicked out and put into jail because he was ciphering money laundering, all this money going through. I mean, there's some really dodgy stuff surrounding it. And then Libya were connected. Libya had this big investment fund that were connected. You had the other Malaysian plane that went down, that was shot down in the Ukraine or the southern USSR part just just before, it was just after, I can't remember, but you know, 2 Malaysian planes both going down during this financial scandal, which is all connected to Goldman Sachs, Department of Justice, Libya. I mean, you just can't write it. It is a big story.
How is the financial scandal attached to the plane though? Who was on the plane, or what was on the plane? Why is that? How is that linked to a conspiracy around?
Because the relationship between Malaysia and the United States at the time was such that the United States really needed Malaysia to play ball. They needed them to keep very quiet about what was going on with ciphering money, a lot of money, a hell of a lot of money, through Goldman Sachs, particularly. And Goldman Sachs ended up in jail as a result of it, or, you know, the equivalent of jail, whatever. I think they got the largest ever fines given. Goldman Sachs, the Department of Justice were found out to be corrupt in their dealings. America had so much to lose in being exposed just on a financial basis without going into the disclosure of potentially what military technology they had that they didn't actually want people to be aware of. I mean, I could write a book on how many reasons the US would have to bring that plane down, because by bringing the plane down, you know, the Malaysian government were going to come under a massive PR saga. And ultimately, the Malaysian prime minister, who was the biggest corrupt guy that was all behind this, who was taking all the backhanders, he would have lost his, you know, prime ministership, you know, with just the bad taste, the sour taste in the mouth. Surely the fact that he did so little to even pursue it, look it up, didn't bother even looking at a mobile phone record to try and help out the people that were stranded. And as you say, the relationship with China, with what was going on there, because at the time, there was big military contracts going on between Malaysia, Russia, and the United States, who were all buying each other's tanks, buying each other's guns, buying each other's weapons. There was a huge weapons trading thing going on. And all of this to the fact that Malaysia owed so much money. They were so indebted to so many people, to so many countries. And the US was coming in to help Malaysia say, right, we'll keep you afloat. We'll keep you afloat. We'll keep the Russians and the Chinese away from you. But this is what you have to do. You have to play ball.
But I understand. But so you're saying we could have just taken down any plane?
No, there were lots of people on that plane. There was meant to be the head of Petronas. That was the biggest one.
Who?
They would have taken out Petronas, wouldn't they?
What's that? What's Petronas?
Is he he's the leader?
It's the equivalent of, what's the biggest oil company in the United States? I don't know. It's the equivalent of BP in the UK. It's the largest oil company in the whole of Southeast Asia.
Is it spelled like P-E-T-R-N?
Petronas, Petronas.
Like petrol. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
What would be the purpose?
But the COO of Petronas, who was obviously part of this big scandal, who'd been taking loads and loads of backhanders, was meant to be on that plane. He would have been the one that was going to be the whistleblower. They would have taken him out, stopped him whistleblowing, and kept it quiet what Goldman Sachs and the DOJ were up to.
But he wasn't on the plane.
Well, he was meant to be. He just didn't get on it.
Oh, okay. This plane is like it's like they put it up for auction to the highest bidder as to what kind of conspiracy he wanted for that day.
And then you've got two Iranians that are on it.
It's not funny. It's not funny, but it's kind of bizarre. It's so bizarre. It is. What do you? I mean.
But look at the countries I've listed. Okay, you've got Kuwait, Iran, Malaysia with Petronas, and the United States, and then you've got the southern part of Russia. You've got the biggest oil producers. All of these oil producers, you know, all backhanding, and Malaysia in the middle of them. To me, that's what it's about. It's money. It's oil money. It's dirty money. It's money laundering. And Malaysia being the most dirty corrupt, with a dirty corrupt prime minister. How many countries have you got where you can actually bribe the prime minister, take down the government, and push loads of money through a whole country? The whole country of Malaysia were told to watch Wolf of Wall Street because it was financed by this money.
What's the leverage to bribe by, though? What is the leverage to bribe by? I don't understand.
Because Malaysia were dirtily swindling or money laundering American money to a massive amount that China were aware of.
how does bringing down the plane accomplish?
Well, I think taking out the biggest whistleblower in Petronas's COO was probably one of them, but there could have been a multitude. I mean, the 2 Iranian guys on there. Maybe they're all the whistleblowers were on the plane. I don't know.
Okay. I had no idea it was even that complicated.
The rabbit holes of life.
I didn't really. I had no idea. I cut and pasted, Ashton's research. I didn't read it. I just cut and pasted in the GPT.
You got to read it.
Well, I was expecting ChatGPT to give me the answer. I was like, "What's the final answer?"
We're too reliant on AI now. We
Yeah,
have AI running our lives.
Well,
I warned you, Tony. Can't use these things too much. No, I'm just
I'm not going to stop playing with it. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
No, because it has bailed me out many times.
Yeah, me too.
But it may be that you could take it as that since an artificial intelligence couldn't come up with a summary answer, that maybe there isn't one. I don't know. It could be it could be the pilot just ordered. I mean, look, the pilot changed the path, right? The flight path he changed it himself, right?
No, just when it comes to what could be a potentiality, right? The pilot could have done that, obviously, but there's also technology you can use to like hack into the computer system and fly the plane around remotely.
Yeah,
Right.
I saw that interview. There's an interview with another pilot that talks about since the fly-by-wire system came in, how easy it is on an autopilot to remotely access and control.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to say is it seems like if it was that easy to, like, one country to blackmail another country by taking down a passenger plane, then it would happen more often. Like it would happen.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, or at least if this went down, we might see that in the future if this is the technology that world governments like this can use to take out planes. Maybe we'll see a similar case.
And people just stop getting on planes.
Yeah,
have to find something. I do find the part. I don't know why I can't get past this many employees of a superconductor with all of the hype surrounding superconductivity now. That does seem weird to me.
You've got to think, this is 10 years ago. There wasn't all that hype at that point, was there? 10 years ago.
I have to ask, were they lithium batteries?
Yes.
I'm going down the rabbit hole now. Okay,
I think,
were there photos of it? Are there photos of these lithium batteries? What is to actually say that they were lithium batteries as opposed to saying that they were
just the manifest, the cargo manifest is the only thing.
Yeah.
What do you check off on the list if you're if you're FAA or whatever it is?
Lithium batteries aren't known to catch fire, right?
I'm going down the rabbit hole and I'm doing the biggest what if ever. So you have your checklist, what do they call them? The FAA, Florida, or whatever it is,
Federal Aviation Administration.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So they have a checklist, like when they check luggage on, what type is it? Is it this, or other? Right? They probably were just like, oh, lithium batteries, check. Or that's one potential. I'm making up stuff now too. Just
that is the main.
I think you're right. And this is the heat signature thing. Are we absolutely sure that heat signature came from the batteries, or do we just know on the cargo we saw batteries and we went, oh, heat signature? I don't know.
I mean, the fact is, we really don't know if that's a real video or not.
No.
So, I mean, okay. So when I didn't know Ashton, I hadn't heard anything about him. I was looking into this a little bit. This was a while back, coincidentally, and I found out that, from my research, and if you ask ChatGPT, these satellites aren't capable of taking video. They only had a digital handshake with the plane.
I think he's had proof on that.
Well, he's talked about that. It's like why it's a technology that makes renders off of photos, basically.
I understand, but I'm saying the public knowledge is one thing, and then there's these theories about other things, right? So, because if you look at the official understanding, there's no satellite that's taking video. There's theories about it, but there's no official right? If you look it
But
up on,
it is, the guy who leaked it must have given Ashton some more information, because Ashton does talk about, because there's 2 or 3 different types of videos there. There's because it's 3D. There's a 3D. There's a thermal. There's so there's different types of satellite images, aren't there? But the guy that leaked it apparently specifically would have gone to an effort to provide more than one camera to make sure it was less debunkable. Because if you only had one angle from one camera, it would have been really easy to debunk it. But if you've got 2 or 3, including a thermal and a 3-dimensional satellite image, then the question then is, were they particularly making sure they were taking all this satellite imagery because they were doing some sort of military exercise to use this new advanced technology to make planes disappear? I don't know.
I guess
Yeah,
I'm not trying to create drama or deny anything. I'm just saying, if you're looking for a data point, the data point is that the official account is that there's no video of the plane. Right. Right. That's the official account.
But you wouldn't have video.
I just wanted to jump in real quick. I think that's just relying too much on ChatGPT.
Well, what is your source then? What is your source for the official? That's my question.
Well,
that's really my point. Right. What is your?
You should use Copilot.
Huh?
Don't use ChatGPT because it doesn't give sources anymore. They cut that out so they don't get sued.
I'm asking you all. I'm asking you 3. What is the official source for the information?
I'm up. I don't know the answer to that one. I don't know
into this at all. I'm just spouting off ideas and trying to sound smart. That's not true. I'm trying to resolve and try to find truth.
I couldn't find the source. I couldn't find it either. Right. So I did. That's why I went to ChatGPT.
Is it not on Ashton's notes?
Yeah. That's why we were both watching that podcast earlier, and I said in the comments, I only trust my own experience, like as far as source of truth.
Oh yeah.
I believe.
Well, if I did that, I would. If I did that, I would not believe anything you told me about teleportation. Right. So I can't always depend on just my.
Well, your experience consists of talking to me for over a year now.
I have no experience. No, but I have no observation, and that was kind of my point to begin with, was that we have never really observed teleportation. So, as far as science, again, going back
come
to,
on, are you a Trekkie or a Star Wars? You have to confess now. Which
no,
are you?
I'm not. Okay, you're getting me wrong, and this is where people get
right.
This is okay. I'm out. This is where people get me wrong. I'm not making claims. I'm saying what is the existing accepted science. That's all I'm saying. If you were to ask Eric Weinstein or Gary Nolan, not Gary Nolan, forget him.
Well, why not ask Dan Winter instead? I guess would be a question.
No, I know, but where I start is where the existing accepted science, and then I go to Dan Winter, and then I go and then I create a cloud of data points, and then I look at, I say, okay, can I merge these?
No, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I think you would even say this yourself in a way, that to accept the mainstream belief as a sort of group thing. Right?
I'm not looking for beliefs. That's my point. I'm looking for what is considered to be the facts of the case.
Well,
yeah.
Who defines that, right? The biggest group thing.
That's why you got to trust science.
And the FAA, right? Or whoever the Malaysian equivalent to the FAA, right? So I'm not saying it's correct again. Okay. People always do this. They assign beliefs to me. It's not true. I'm saying if I ask you what was the cure for AIDS, you would have an answer. You would have a therapy, right? You would have the accepted scientific therapy.
Yeah, frequencies and vibrations, nothing to do with pharmacy.
Yeah. Right. If I
what if science is always kind of constantly evolving and it's a bell curve of understanding?
It would be nice if it was evolving.
There's never one answer. Science never gives one answer, and we can never be sure that science is correct. That's why it is fascinating.
Well, let's say this is incorrect over here. This is correct over here. There's a bell curve of intelligence. And basically,
Fine.
the evolution of it is constantly sliding to the side, like towards more
See,
correct.
Power of One has
And
the
like-
right idea. We can test it. We can take 20 guys from another important company.
Stick them on an
that was
aeroplane.
that was my point a while ago. Who's going to want to get on the
Oh,
airplane?
let's try Disney. Elon Musk.
What
was
I
like,
just wanted to finish off saying real quick. So you have this bell curve of intelligent scientists moving always towards correct, right, or truth, or something like that. You're going to have people that are the outliers on one end, and they might think or know based off of experimental data, which we were talking about earlier, like about making vortex energy go at longitudinal speeds, that there is a truth that mainstream science has yet to accept it and also start yet to teach within universities. One concept that's been taught, understood, well known since 1920, and I'm bringing it up again, is Thomas Townsend Brown with electrogravitics. Now you have other stuff like Dan Winter, what he speaks about and how he uses that to clarify med beds and vortex energy. The longitudinal aspect of electromagnetism is well known. Let me just put it that way. But it's not well known to anyone that went through universities.
But how do you apply that to teleportation is the question.
It's not necessarily teleportation. The human body is limited by the factor of the speed of light as far as information exchange and ability to perceive. Like our bodies aren't tuned to a longitudinal electromagnetism. We're tuned to a transverse electromagnetism. The eyeball only picks up transverse electromagnetism. But then longitudinal electromagnetism also exists. And that's basically conscious density. It's the scaled waveforms collapsing into the now moment from the phone or the ether. And so that's why what Moneypenny was saying earlier, where are they going? Are they going to the past? Are they going
That's
to the
all part
future?
of this free energy. You're spot on, Alexi. That is exactly what I've been studying with this free energy stuff with the plasmoids, which you've probably been looking at, the ball lightning machines.
It's all in the infinite pool experience.
This is why the plane will never be found.
No, but so that's where all my personal research and work goes after literally studying this for 30 years, coming from my opinion, a very objective and unbiased view, and not listening to anyone else talk about this. I don't care what.
Have you built a machine in your garage that does it? Because I have seen lots of people who Ashton has recommended that have built ball lightning type machines, but to creates energy because you put in a certain temperature and it comes out 10-degree more temperature and whatever comes off it than before.
We can easily create plasma, but having it transport, stuff.
Well,
having it break down. I mean, the way we use light right now is we send it in packets, right? That's how our
each packet is probably related to a wavelength.
Right, but I'm just saying we don't actually we interpret those packets. We don't actually send information on the packets. We just send packets, and then it's like a radio signal. They come to us.
You modulate a wave. Is what I think. Instead of having one
on fiber optics, fiber optics is just packets of light, right? Just pop.
Yeah, what's a packet of light though?
So what I'm saying, but there's no actual information per se in that. It's like a radio. It's like a frequency, right? There's no actual information on a radio signal. It's just we're taking the transmitted part and we're taking a receiver and we're translating it, right?
Yeah, it's like how you have a laser compact disc and there's little microscopic indentations on the disc, and then the laser picks up the distance between those discs.
Yeah,
your eyes are basically.
But it's like sending a code. It's like sending a Morse code with radio waves or something. So my point is that to take a real person from one point and send it to the next is not the same thing as sending information through your light waves or radio waves. Well, you have to disassemble the person and then put them back together.
That's why I don't think you necessarily dematerialize a person. It might appear to look like you're dematerializing them, but ultimately you're just sending that entire flow of space-time. You're shifting the nodes of manifestation. You're literally being created by one half past and one half future.
But how many people would understand that? They prefer it if you say Star Trek, transport, matter, off.
Yeah. That's gross.
It's easier to say dematerialize, but that it's you always have a body, and the body is relative to your inertial reference frame.
But
So you're going to dematerialize to anyone looking at you. That's all I'm trying to say.
I know,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
the whole point is we want the plane on the other side. We don't want to take a chance on losing it to another dimension. You know,
Of course.
so
Yeah.
if you really want the plane, if you're really trying to get the people on the plane or the technology, you're going to do it in a safe manner. You're going to do it in the safest manner, and you're going to create a smoke screen so that people will think the plane is gone forever, but the plane is really sitting on the runway at the Diego Garcia runway.
It might have all gone wrong. I mean, look, 2/3 of DARPA projects go wrong. They just go wrong. So maybe whatever happened was a military procedure to try and take it down without killing and shooting it down, because that would have been obvious and people would have seen it. So they needed a way to get rid of it without, you know, any evidence of it being shot, taken down, blah, blah, blah. And maybe the experiment went wrong.
You know, if you want to hear my current theory,
please.
my current theory is that the technology on the drone, if there was a drone and it was following the plane because it was a military operation, all this is hypothetical. I think the drones have tracking technology, right? They can track the objects, right? My question is, can they literally remove, can the equipment, I'm not talking about editing the video. Everybody keeps thinking I'm talking about it. No, they didn't edit the video. I'm not talking about editing the video. I'm talking about live action. Can the camera equipment remove the object it's tracking? Because it's tracking the information in front of the plane too, right? It could literally mask the plane with the information from the background, right?
Yeah, live green screen technology exists.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. That would be a much simpler explanation than teleportation. And I'm trying to get to if we're trying to just get the plane and we're not trying to create, like, you know, time dilation.
I already told you, I have no opinion about whether or not this plane even existed, like whether or not it disappeared. I personally have, I don't care. This sounds awful. I care about everyone that got hurt and stuff, but I really don't. It's not like you've talked about it a lot, actually. Like how at the end of the day we have to live our human life, right?
I hope
so.
So.
Like, did this happen? Did that happen? Did this happen? It's for me. It's
the data point of the family is not feeling like, none of them reported feeling that their relatives are actually gone missing. If the plane was taken,
they're still around, right?
Yeah. So if the plane was taken out deliberately as opposed to transported,
well,
I take that as a pretty solid data point.
What? There are also like phone calls that were still going, apparently, like after they said the official time what they had cut off. And then I just feel I want to know that, like, I do truly it's awful when something like that happens, especially for like the loved ones and family members and all that stuff. But that the show on Netflix called Manifest seems to be it's like the closest thing I've ever heard of to this case, where like the plane disappears and it traveled through time, right? And so like, will it reappear? Will it? I know that's why I don't even want to like bring that up, because I feel bad about
honestly, there's so many movies that have what we think are very sci-fi sort of storylines. There's Constellation or something I'm watching at the moment on Apple, which is exactly about what we are talking about, spookily so. But in the UAP cables that I was referring to earlier, again, if you look at the cables going back 1970s, 1980s, there are Hollywood producers, directors that are brought into the CIA, NSA, DTRA, you know, whatever your little agency people, and Hollywood directors, researchers go in there, and they are briefed by the intelligence agencies off record. You might find this interesting. It's it's a fascinating type thing. Obviously, it's I can't tell you that it's real. There's so much linkage between using the power of Hollywood, the power of movies, as part of, I call it the psyop. Of maybe if we want to manage expectations about whether or not aliens exist, whether or not it's possible to transport planes, whether or not it's to do this, you would do that. You as a three-letter agency would start to mass Hollywood, the whole world, to be managing expectations about things happening. Or you might want to divulge things that have actually happened through a manifest type storyline, so that when it does happen, people are like, oh, I'm sure I have a knowledge of that somewhere. Yes, I can take it on board. Do you know what I mean?
Especially if you're trying to like manipulate, or not manipulate, but somewhat guide towards people towards a type of thinking, right? You want to introduce it through movies, through films. Now you're somewhat shifting the entire thought. Ultimately, we're all just human on Earth. Like, we're the most primitive level, and everything we know comes from what we see in the media. And so if you want to guide people towards a certain direction, you're going to do it through movies.
Yeah.
And is it so far-fetched to think that people like that have infiltrated Hollywood and whatnot? I mean, it's pretty well known at this point that they infiltrated like CNN and all those other kinds of things. If you were really doing that whole entire concept, you would definitely infiltrate the movie industry, the music industry. You would have mad scientists that exist within that world doing mad scientist things.
Like, from what I understand of mass manipulation from government agencies, it's usually done in the form of distractions and creating or drawing the attention of the public's focus to a really cool story or whatever. Like the theory on the blue dress or blue white dress versus or like, is it blue and gold or is it
Yeah.
black?
Yeah.
There are theories that was one. I don't see this happening as much in Hollywood. We do see Hollywood being altered directly with script writing to make movies fit in ways that are ritual to China as an audience, which South Park did a really good episode on that, actually. And that's the strong evidence I've seen for that so far, but I haven't really paid attention to Hollywood.
Well, some would argue that they've been portraying extraterrestrials as like bad, right? Because almost every single movie you see with ET in it, it's like them coming to take over the world. And then you have like some people would say that's one of the things that they're doing. But not only that, but just literally introducing futuristic technologies that might already exist, like teleportation in Star Trek, for example. Ways to get people to become familiar with the technology, so when it does come out, they're like, "Oh, that's like Star Trek. They're teleporting."
Yeah,
people.
and like,
Yeah,
when I think
that's
about
it.
Star Trek,
Managing expectations. You see, and you've got that Nelson Mandela effect, the
You have no
Mandela effect.
reference,
That, a few years on, you may not remember that it was actually manifest, a movie that you watch. You would just somewhere in your brain have it. I know that is true, that you can transport stuff and that has happened before. I remember it, but you might not necessarily relate that to a movie that you saw. So by feeding all this subconscious information in, from whatever way possible, and movies are a damn good way of doing it. Absolutely, as an intelligence agency, you would absolutely use that media. I'm gonna have to go see. My eyes are hurting. I'm sorry.
What did you say? You're gonna
my eyes are hurting. I think it's from the glare of the screens.
Oh. Are you ready to leave us?
Soon, yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay. No, I don't want you to suffer just for our cause.
Yeah, I've got
I
a lot
know.
of parts of my body that suffer.
I think if our government was going to take the plane, it would find a more humane way. Because I mean, obviously, you have to do something with the other people you don't want on the. I just think there's a lot easier ways to get what you want. What's that?
9/11.
I don't think that we killed our own people on 9/11.
I'd hate to think you would, but unfortunately, there is some evidence that it's possible.
Yeah, the false flag operation is pretty strong.
That was a rabbit hole you just opened up.
Yeah.
Well, it's not as bad as 6 billion people catching an engineered pathogen that was made and funded by an American government.
American government? You're talking about the Chinese, the Wuhan
lab?
No,
I'm talking about Fort Detrick, where it leaked way before it leaked in Wuhan, several months before. Go and look it up. I'll send you the articles. I'll show you the article of the Old People's Home, the care centre, around the corner from Fort Detrick, that in July of 2019 had a mass illness where they lost lives of several older people, and where the CDC and the FDA stepped in and closed down Fort Detrick because of it.
You know what else happened in that July, that summer? A Chinese scientist got kicked out of a lab in Canada. Remember that? That was actually had the vac. They were studying I think they were actually doing
And the
you know,
and the Chinese American or American Chinese scientists that were working at Fort Detrick were caught carrying vials on an airplane going into Shanghai.
Being funded by a Harvard professor, right? Or no? Were those the same ones that were funded by the Harvard professor?
Yeah,
like,
I think you're on about Barrick. Is it Barrick you're on about? Probably.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So the vials that came from Fort Detrick, which was closed down after spreading an unknown respiratory virus, which killed a load of people in a care center 6 months before you're accusing Wuhan of having a leak. There may be more to the story. That's all I'm saying.
It does seem
Okay,
like
so
it's,
now pretend I'm James Bond. What do I do?
can't have Moneypenny. She's on mine.
well, Moneypenny, I wanted to ask you a couple of things. I don't know if you want to get into it, but you mentioned Xenobots, and also I'm not sure, but were you talking with Gad Sad a few days ago?
Behavioral scientist chat.
Yeah, I randomly watched one of his videos, and then I heard him mention that you were commenting. I didn't get to hear your comment though. I only finished half the video. Do you remember exactly what it was you were asking him? It's on deterministic.
Loads of things. In fact, he couldn't get rid of me. He threw me off the show because he couldn't get away. I was asking loads of questions. Yeah. No, I was talking mainly about gender dysphoria because of the problem that some viruses obviously affect the brain, particularly. So you've got things like Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, Guillain-Barré disease, all these sorts of things that are to do with what's called prions, proteins in the brain. And SARS-CoV-2, as it actually stands, is particularly damaging to the neurological system and the brain. There is a 6 to 8% actual loss in a weight of the brain that is being recorded in long COVIDs. And in particular, the problem of the diseases that it's causing is loss of memory, front medular region, creative abilities, all this brainy fog thing that people have got that, we've all had. And all of that is connected to this potential of an increase in gender dysphoria. And I was asking him about whether or not this imbalance in society, this feeling of not knowing what gender or not having a gender or not being comfortable with a gender was related to his whole behavioral science stuff.
Yeah,
and then
that's really
but don't you think that there's also a case to be made just pure political, the political aspects of gender dysphoria? I mean, where you have people who are moved to one side or the other through
there's
political
loads of reasons. Yeah,
leaning, that, and then they teach their children one thing or the other. It leads to, you know what I mean? It seems to
I
me
think a lot of it is the glamour aspect of social media, of young kids wanting attention and getting more views by saying they've changed or they're doing this, that, the other, or whatever. And unfortunately, I think that is the competitive thing that snowballs amongst the youth of today that is completely disassociated with anything, has no element of control over their world, that is shut down, locked in a room, told to wear a mask, and suddenly they have nothing to hang on to.
Told they don't have free will.
And also told that they're not taught how to establish an identity. This is a lot of what I'm writing on in my own book at the moment. The problem of the westernized individualist culture that we have, especially in the United States, where it's more ego obsessed. It's more about the individual as opposed to the collective. In addition to the problem of not really being taught in school what it means to have identity and how to make a name for yourself, or how to feel comfortable in your body, or how to become the best version of yourself, like all of that kind of language I had to learn outside of academia.
You're absolutely right. It's not taught. It's not taught in Britain. It's not taught, to my knowledge, in Europe. It's definitely not taught in the United States, from what I've heard in various discussions. But
so
it's become a selfish society.
This is the point I was trying to make about the political aspect of this, is that curriculums are bad about being developed through political, right, leanings. Like I know you all probably don't want to hear this, but I was married to two different teachers, not at the same time, but and they policies handed down to them from the state, which are, you mentioned education, Patrick. Okay, you said we weren't taught certain things in school, but we are taught some things, and what we are taught is, anyway, it's a rabbit hole. But
Well, that's what I wanted to say too.
There's-
It depends on. Patrick also mentioned that it depends on curriculum, right? And so not everybody has
I think
the
I
same
said that.
curriculum.
Yeah.
Not everybody has the same curriculums. They have
The
what I'm trying
curriculums
to
are
get
more
at.
controlled,
I
and you
used
think that
I
curriculums are
used to teach
controlled by
after-school
the.
martial arts, and so when I was
They most
teaching that,
certainly
we
are
had a
controlled.
very specific curriculum on confidence building. So we're literally learning confidence building, being
Ah.
respectful to other people, working as a team, developing what you were saying, like a sense of community efforts and work, versus you only care about yourself and you're only learning the school curriculum. So there's different
And it's like-
curriculums that you learn through
To
different.
get a job at a school as a teacher, you have to join a local union that's affiliated with the NEA. Okay, the NEA tells the union, teachers unions, what the curriculum are, and those people go to the school boards and they say this is the curriculum. That's how politics gets embedded into our education system. I know this for a fact. I saw it for 30 years, being married to two different teachers. Okay, they especially teachers in the South, and did I get rid of Moneypenny? But I'm just saying, I'm saying you don't
Sorry,
have
I've got
schools.
a screen that is.
Schools
I'm going
don't
to turn
have.
my video off, but I'll leave my audio on.
Yeah, schools don't have that. They don't. You don't have every school with a different. If it's a public school, it has a curriculum that's handed down to it by the state, and
Yep.
that state has a board that decides what the curriculum is going to be, and those are related to the political parties. So I hate to bring that rabbit hole up, but that's actually a fact.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. You know what I'm saying? And like even like the private schools, are the curriculum is more dependent upon the teacher, but the
Private
teacher
schools are different.
will lean in one direction when it comes to a private.
That's why parents like me sent our kids to a private school when we could afford it. So, well, Moneypenny, I didn't mean to run you off. Sorry. I just a little passion.
I've got my eyes. It's like a migraine. My eyes, my head.
I personally lived through that whole thing of how curriculums get handed down, and people used to argue with me about this all the time. But it's anyway. Well, Moneypenny, are you ready to head out? Do you have anything else you would like to close with?
No, I don't say goodbye. Thank you for asking me. I'd love to come back in and do other science stuff, though, if you ever have room for it, because I think I'd like to do a whole show on xenobots and on when it's on bioelectricity and biorobots under what Levin has done when he was interviewed by Lex Friedman. That is fascinating. That is the meaning of life.
Yeah, I'd love to do another show, even in a week or so. If you want to come back, and we could just focus on that. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to take us down the rabbit hole of MH370. I guess it's just part of the current schema.
Maybe it can be a regular thing. Like tonight we did MH370, and next time we'll do Michael Levin morphogenetic spaces and things like that.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Honestly, I would do. Yeah.
What were the bots you were talking about?
The xenobots, XEN xenobots.
Okay.
But basically, it goes further than xenobots. It is basically biological robots where you break it down to a level where a tiny cell that you take off a frog's skin can become independent to the extent it can go through a maze, it can communicate with another bot, and it's nano, it's tiny, but it is able to have consciousness.
Yeah, and it assembles itself and creates more, or brings other cells around it and starts building.
Self-replicate in 48 hours. 48 hours, it can self-replicate. Think of putting one of those biobots into a humanoid robot and putting them all in a maze, letting them communicate with each other, letting them self-replicate, letting them build and extend their own physical abilities. Think about it.
It's breakthrough science. Like other people have said, Michael Levin is probably one of the most important people living on the planet at the moment. His team is incredibly valuable, but his ability to bring that together in a way that could be applied to human flourishing and the regrowth of organs and all that. Yeah, we're looking at a bright future, I think.
I think we should definitely do a show on that.
Let's do that. Let's plan it for a week from today. How about that? Is everybody good
Brilliant.
with that?
That's cool with me.
Sounds good.
No, I'm serious. I want to plan it because I really want to do that. I want us to get off onto something that's more interesting.
Well, next Friday night as well. It's Saturday morning for me now, but yeah, that's fine for me.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, thank you, Moneypenny. It was really nice getting to talk to you finally. I keep hearing your voice on Spaces, and it's so
Now you know who
intriguing.
I am.
That intriguing voice. I had to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Alexi.
Thank you.
Good to meet you.
Tony.
See ya.
Bye.
I'll be talking to you. Bye.
Right on.
Well, that was cool.
Yes,
Finally, some intriguing women, some females space. Some
You didn't have
females in the
the
space.
show,
Huh?
Patrick gets what I'm doing, I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think I saw you grabbing your book.
I'm back to my book.
Are you going to end the show, or are we going to?
I'm cool with that talk.
I didn't know. I didn't want to just end it without giving you all a chance to say anything.
Oh, I was going to say, well, I'm okay with staying on, but also ready to end it. But when we end it, give me 10 seconds. Give us 10 seconds. I want to try something new here at the end.
You mean after or before?
Just say we're ending in 10 seconds.
We're ending in 10 seconds. What's that mean? What's that mean?
You didn't end it.
Okay, let's make it. We're gonna make it 5 more seconds because I wasn't ready.
Oh, well, in that case.
What you are about to see is a real life story. The accounts have gone into great detail to give each